Welcome to Beyond the Gear. So today I wanted to kind of talk about a shoe that, man, really blew my mind. It didn't take much for this one to make an impression on me. I think that the brand is great. I think that the the whole idea of this shoe was just mastered from the very start, and I think that I was genuinely shocked. I think other people were genuinely shocked when they purchased this shoe. It's got strong advocacy. It's a fairly new company, and of course I'm talking about the Mount to Coast H1 shoe. So digging in, when I bought this shoe, what I was looking for, I was running in my Hoka Mach X2 road shoes, and I had upgraded to those from the previous Hoka Mach 6 shoes. I needed a little more cushion. I needed a little more stability, something that could handle some higher mileage, since my races were getting longer, and you know, the balls in my feet were starting to hurt with the Hoka Mach 6, so I upgraded to the Mach X2, and I'll have a video on that as well, reviewing the Mach X2. I think they were a really well done shoe, minus some design flaws. But what I needed was a different kind of shoe. I was running, what prompted this to begin with was I did a race in Amarillo, the Jericho Gap, and I have a video on that race talking about kind of the flaw that my shoes ended up having. And during that race, I was wearing the Merrell Agility Peak 5 shoes, and good shoes, but not for what that race needed. It was a trail run, but it wasn't that technical. It was just dirt roads and gravel and a little bit of mud. So that kind of got me on this path of looking for something that could handle light gravel, light trails, you know, mud, things like that, but gave me the cushion and the comfort that the Mach X2 did on the road. I did wear the Mach X2 quite a bit on the trails, but man, it is not a trail shoe. It is not made for that at all. So thus began the hunt. I needed a hybrid, so to speak. And in the mornings, I was, you know, starting to run and practice more on light trails to kind of get a feel for that, because I feel like a lot of races that I end up doing end up being on a light trail, and even one that I plan on doing in the canyons is, of course, in a canyon. So there's not as many road races that I've been doing. If I do a road race, of course, I have the Mach X2. So enough of that. Getting into the H1s. You know, what happened basically was I went to Amarillo to look for a shoe. I had a list of shoes that I created, things that I've done research on, things that I knew I liked, things that were highly rated, and I wanted to try every single one of them out first and basically gauge, okay, this one is good, this one is good. And I went to a place called Get Fit. Awesome place, right there in Amarillo. And they had some of these Mount to Coasts up there. Now, previously I had watched the Cocodona 250 race, and the runner Killian Korth was wearing some Mount to Coasts. So it was a brand that I've heard of, but I haven't really, you know, ever researched. And I thought, I wonder what these are all about. You know, I thought only Ultrarunners wore these. You know, they're kind of like a Solomon or a Merrell or something like that, you know, just way out there, way overkill for what I'm needing as a, you know, as a newbie runner, someone beginner who doesn't need that much. So the guy that was helping me out was wearing some of these Mount to Coasts. He was wearing the C1 shoes. And I asked him, hey, what do you think of these? And he said he absolutely loved them. So I thought, let's give them a shot. Let's see what they feel like. Man, took 2 seconds of wearing them for me to realize that these were the best shoes I have ever worn in my life. So I gave them a shot. I said, okay, well, right now these are obviously the winners, but I'm gonna try everything else just to make sure. So I went, I wore every single shoe on my list, and nothing compared to these. These were the ones. And in a way, they kind of found me as much as I found them. As a musician, you kind of get that feeling when you're shopping for a new bass or things like that, and you kind of just know sometimes that these are the ones. But it's always good to double check, you know, because you never really know. So a little disclaimer, I am not an ultra runner. The most that I have ran so far is about 10 miles. I'm a pretty light, easy runner. I'm still getting into it, and I haven't been doing it long enough to really kill myself yet. But I will be honest, wearing these made me feel like, man, I might be able to I might be able to run an ultra in these bad boys. I could see that happening, you know. I think these shoes have just solidified to me that they know what they're doing. This company is top notch. So talking about Mount to Coast, who are these guys? I mean, they're brand new. They don't have very many shoes out. So a little backstory. Mount to Coast was founded by Nike, Brooks, and New Balance vets. They made their United States debut in about, I think, April of 2024 is when they first announced in April. They are based in China, but they're a small group, and they all have just a passion for ultra running, and they make it basically their mission to make the best ultra shoe ever. In fact, their goal, if you look on their website, you can find this, and if you watch interviews and things of that, they even mention that they want to become the #1 ultra running brand by 2030. And honestly, I think they could, the way that it's going so far. So these shoes, I mean, talking specifically about the H1s, these have been tested not by beginners, but by ultramarathoners. Honestly, on average, about 300 plus runners with about 90,000 plus testing miles over 20 months before this shoe was even released. Big names like Justin Montague set the Jogel course record, 854 miles in the R1s. Meg Eckert set the women's 6-day world record, about 603 miles in the H1s. Jamil Corey ran over 600 miles of a 730-mile challenge in a single pair of the H1s. These things have been tried, tested, and proven many times over, and they continue to be tested and proven. Like I mentioned, Killian Korth ran the Cocodona 250 in these, things like that. They've started to build up quite a bit of a reputation in the ultra space and the trail running space as well, and I think that they have every right to be there. So how did I become, you know, a Mount to Coast loyalist? It is now a proven fact that I'm obsessed with these things. I think these things are the best shoes out there. So really, honestly, all it took one video. It took one video for me to be fully convinced before I even tried these on that Mount to Coast was the way to go. I watched Thomas Newberger run an ultra through the Grand Canyon in a prototype version of the Believe in the Run H1 shoes. I also watched one other video after this one of Thomas Newberger talking about how he built the shoe and why he built the shoe and things like that. And honestly, it hit me in the heart, and you know, it really opened my eyes to the ultra running world and running world as a general whole, as well as the team at Mount to Coast and how much they really genuinely care. And you can feel it. You can feel how much they care and the effort that they put in their shoes, and the care that they create their quality craft with. So to me, you know, ultra running really taps into something primal. You know, to me, it's a connection to yourself, but it's also a connection to God and creation that really no other sport offers. You know, I've read countless ultra running books talking about suffering through those miles, and I was inspired by every single one of those and their journeys and just what the world of ultra running can offer. Of course, I am not an ultra runner myself. I'm just not there yet. Honestly, one day I will be, I think. and I'm just sucked into the life. You know, I'm sucked into the culture, and I think Mountain Coast really presents that in their brand and their shoes and everything that they stand for. You know, I think they're simple, and I think marketing wise they're minimal, but they know exactly what they're doing, they know exactly who they're reaching, and they reach, and I think they do a great job at that. So watching that video and doing a little research into Mountain Coast, and of course wearing these shoes and all that, I've solidified. You know, I'm fully invested in this shoe to the point where I'm even considering thinking about getting either the C1 or the R1 road running shoes to replace my Hokas with. I think that they are that good. So let's break down the shoe. Let's get into the nitty gritty of the H1. So, as I mentioned, Mountain Coast does have multiple shoes that are kind of geared towards multiple things, and I personally believe that if you use them for that purpose, they're going to do great. The H1s were and are considered your gravel, your light trail, and your road to trail hybrids. So that means they've got smaller lugs. They can handle some trails, nothing super technical though, but they can also handle some road running as well, and it won't be overkill. They do have the T1 shoe, which I did try out, which has bigger lugs, and it's made a little different, and it's geared a lot more for technical trails and harder terrain. And then of course, like I mentioned, the C1 and others like the S1, the R1, the P1, you know, all of those are built more for road running and things like that. C1, I believe, has a lot more cushion than the other three, but just go on their website, check it out, see what they have. But today we're talking about mostly just the H1. So let's start from the top. What we're talking about, the H1 actually has two different uppers. It's got a softer jacquard weave for breathability, comfort, natural flex, things like that. I believe it's really well made. I believe that the stitching that connects the top and the bottom uppers was really well done, really secure. I don't feel any separation, any worry that it's going to break down over time. The bottom part of the upper is actually made with reinforced aramid, which is Kevlar fibers for trail durability. Watching some reviews, and then of course one of my favorite groups, Run Repeat, they did a durability test and it held up really well. The inner material does not wear out very fast, and they have ample cushion around the tongue and the heel, so your foot feels good when it's in place, and it's very well structured, which I like. The Hoka Mach X2s are very soft and pliable, and they break down easy. That drives me nuts. So I'm glad that these have sturdiness and stability. Your foot slips in very easily, very comfortably. It sits very comfortable, and I believe that the durability is awesome. You know, it's very flexible. It maneuvers to your foot. It kind of forms to your foot a little bit, which I love. I think that's great. And the tongue, of course, is gusseted. It's very breathable. I will admit to the breathability, and I can vouch for it, being that I live in an area where it gets to be over 100 degrees, and when I do those runs in that heat, I try not to, but when I do, I feel the airflow very well through these, as well as the interior, the bottom. My feet do not build up a lot of friction, so they don't burn, which means that it's dispersing the heat very well, which is good. The insole is removable, so you can put your own custom inserts in there as well. And then there also is a gator loop right here on the back. Let's talk about the lacing. Now this is something I've never seen before. This is really interesting. So they actually have two lacing situation here. It's called their TUNEDFIT lacing system. So at the top you've got your standard laces about halfway through, but at the bottom you actually have your reinforced, a different kind of lace. It's that adjustable cinch quick lacing system here. What that does is that allows, you know, you can loosen the top or loosen the bottom depending on how your foot is swelling as you hit those bigger miles. When you really start moving in these, it's inevitable that your feet are going to swell up, but that gives you a little more control over the dynamics of the shoe and the tightness and how it fits. And I think that's an awesome added addition, something again I've never seen before. So 2 lacing systems up here, and they're well made, they're in there pretty good. Now I normally have to do the heel lock lacing on 99% of the shoes that I purchase. Did not have to do that with these. They fit great. As soon as I tied them up, they locked my heel right in place without even having to move them, and I think that's awesome. So talking about the foam, the big daddy part of the Mount to Coast shoe. So they call this foam their CircleCELL technology, which is basically a fancy marketing way to say it's a PEBA foam. It's not too stiff, but it's also not real soft either. It's kind of that good in between feel that I personally prefer. I have experienced that a lot of the softer foams are just not my thing. I'm not one to run on clouds, but like the Merrells, there's a point when it's just too stiff, too structured. No carbon plate, nothing like that, but honestly, none needed. I think it gives a great amount of energy return. It's very springy. I believe it gives a lot of energy back, and it's a very grounded feel. I think personally that they nailed this here, and there's no fancy features. There's nothing major to it. It's just, you know, got a nice little gradient colorway here, and that's pretty much all there is to it. This does have marketed a 6mm drop, but when it was measured in the lab, it actually came out to about 8.1mm, which personally I was kind of looking for a little bit higher drop, so I'm not too disappointed in that, but that's something to note in case you're looking for a lower drop shoe. I think that the foam was really well designed, you know, especially thinking about trails and traction and things like that and different terrains. You know, when you take a vehicle off-road, oftentimes they will actually deflate the tire a little bit so that it rolls over, you know, hard rocks and things like that, as well as giving you a little more surface area to grip. Now I believe that the reason that this foam here is a little bit softer than even your standard you know, Roadrunner is for that same reason. A little deflated so that it can kind of roll and take on those harsher rocks, those bigger trail terrains a little bit easier, plus give you more surface area to work with. So talking about the grip and the outsole here, this is their Versagrip down here on the bottom, and then you have that accompanied with your 2mm lugs. I thought that maybe that would be too small right at first, but I have taken this out a few times, and running in gravel, things like that, it actually does a really good job. It handles the gravel really well. Dirt, roads, things like that, I think 2mm is all you need. And the only downside that I will say to this grip is when I ran on some mud, it did slip a little bit. Not the end of the world, but if you're expecting some pretty muddy terrain, I would just be cautious is all I'm going to say. Because personally, I think that they have some improvements to make on this grip. I think it could be just slightly better, maybe better grip. But, you know, they've come a long way. Maybe one day they'll even replace it with some Vibram and kind of join that crowd a little bit, and it will just amplify these shoes even more. But honestly, I like that they're taking on their own grip. They're making this shoe kind of just all their own shoe. The weight, this thing weighs around 8.8 ounces, and that's for a men's size 9. But it's very balanced. You know, it feels good, feels lightweight. Most trail shoes tend to be on the heavy side. My Merrells definitely were heavy. But these are lightweight. I mean, they bounce real easy, they breathe real easy, and you know, there's not much else I can say about them. They're really good at handling road and trail, exactly what they're advertised for. The top does have some reflective detail, which I did not mention earlier. So if you're running at night, be aware that there is something there to let people know where you're at. So So who's the target? I mean, who are they really aiming for? Of course, you've got your Ultrarunners, but honestly, I think these shoes are really good for your everyday runner who kind of runs out on some dirt roads, maybe some gravel, just a little bit off-road. Nothing crazy, but you're not on the road. But I also think that if you decide one day to run on the road, this shoe can handle it. Personally, I think if you run in your neighborhood or you run in the park, you know, this is a good shoe. I think the balanced stack height bridges the gap between your road and trail models. So I think it's got a lightweight, unplated, max cushioning. I think this is a great shoe for really your everyday training situations. And I'm gonna take this one out on a couple races, and I think it will do fantastic. Of course, it's made for an ultra running runner. So my personal belief is that it's gonna be able to handle some of those faster miles and really anything I throw at it. This shoe does run pretty narrow, so I personally think if you have a wider foot, probably avoid this one. I don't believe they have a wide model of this shoe available, so just keep that in mind. I think it's going to be a little on the wide side. If you're a flat-footed person such as myself, you are going to notice that there is a little bit higher arch on there. I personally thought that was going to be problematic at first until I ran in them, and then I realized that when you run in these, that arch pretty much disappears and you don't even feel it. I do believe that it helps with stability a lot. It's not really a stability shoe. This is a neutral, this is considered a neutral shoe, so if you're looking for something that is mainly stability, this is probably not it. But for a neutral shoe, I think it works great. So rounding everything out, you know, I think it holds up to its marketing hype, and I think it earns its permanent spot, at least in my rotation. And I think, you know, even though the company is an early company, I think give them a shot. They've really nailed exactly what they're doing, and you know, they prove that you don't need fancy gimmicks. You just need a simple, well-designed shoe to really make everything easier on yourself, you know. I think the shoe world has just gotten really crazy as of late. You know, you've got 15 million different brands, and all those brands have like 17 million different shoes, and there's just so many options out there. But I personally believe that Mountain Coast came in and said, hey, you know, here's something that can kind of handle everything that you're looking for all in one shoe, all in one package. I think it's a standout shoe for, you know, racing or, you know, going out and exploring some trails. To me personally, I want to take this out on trails now. And I believe that running is kind of my connection to nature. So having a shoe that kind of gives you the opportunity to do that, and you don't have to think about them, you don't have to worry about them, it's just going to work, is awesome. And you can't ask for anything better. As always, stay motivated, stay encouraged, and get out on the trails and enjoy yourself, man. Running should not be for only the athletic. I think walking and running is a great way to get outside and experience the world. Get involved in the community, join a run club, you know, see what the world has to offer. So anyway, that's going to wrap things up for today's video. Appreciate you watching, and see you guys in the next one.